faster than the time it takes to brew a cup of tea.
High Tea Mystique reminds you that no experience is too big or too small to teach us something about ourselves.
Join us for a cup of tea as we steep into adulting, womanhood, independence, and more.
How was your guys' day?
My day was nice. I went for a run,
Fantastic.
of course.
At what time?
At 7 a.m. It was on the beach. It was really nice. And then afterwards, for like the first time ever, I jumped in the ocean after my run. I can't believe I've never done that, like living in Miami and stuff, but it was beautiful. The water was like refreshing.
And it was really sunny today.
It was really sunny, so I thought the water might be hot,
Oh, yeah.
but it wasn't. It was still really nice. I think because the sun had like just come up.
Well, and
Yeah.
it's also been raining a lot. So I feel
Oh,
like it's really
yeah.
cooled down
That's
the waters.
the best time to run, by the way, is like right after a storm if it's like
Really?
not sunny, if it's not sunny.
Okay.
So like I ran on Wednesday after the storm and it was dark outside already and it was like low humidity, this gorgeous breeze, and I was just in the middle of a neighborhood. I was not near water or anything, and I was just like, I need this weather all the time.
Yeah, because sometimes I see your stories and you're running and it's raining and I'm like, "Ugh," I just think about how muggy and sticky it is because it's Miami and that's how rain is.
Yeah,
Now
that's
we're-
exactly how it is.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was say, it's the opposite.
There's
No.
no magic.
Nope.
No, that's
no,
how
no.
they feel.
Yeah. It's muggy magic.
Nice.
What about you, Tess? How's your day?
My day was good. It was very uneventful. I'll admit that. I had great sleep though, so I'm willing to compromise.
I wish.
Yeah, I know it's hard to come by, but
Yeah,
great sleep is important.
these days.
So I wish it
Yeah.
on everybody here.
It's true.
Especially me. I need it. I haven't been able to get good sleep recently. And this morning I had to drop my mom off at the airport.
That's
It was
right.
an interesting event, but you know,
Yeah,
she made it.
That's good.
that's all that matters.
Safe travels, mama.
Yeah.
Safe
She's there enjoying her little grandbabies. So today we have new microphones. We have a new series we're starting. So there's a lot of new things today.
A series.
Yeah. So the series that we're starting is called The Perspective Diaries. And today's episode, we're going to take you on our journey of self-discovery and what that has looked like, something that has led to any changes in that journey and where that journey may be going.
Mm.
But before we start, today we are drinking a delicious jasmine tea. Kat, if you could tell us a little bit about it.
I would love to, she said as she gulped her sip. I am so excited. I think all of us are when we were choosing our tea for today's topic, because as you guys see, the name of this is called The Perspective Diaries. So it's going to be a fun series. We'll have different episodes kind of centering around that. But because today's journey is to self-discovery, we thought about that idea of blossoming and blooming into yourself, which is an homage to our very first episode, right? 28 things we wish we knew before we were 28, and how we had a blooming tea that day. So this is the next time that we're using a tea that actually incorporates a flower. So today we're having a jasmine tea.
Jasmine tea.
Yes. And all three of us can agree that this is one of our favorite teas to have. There are so many different ways that you can have jasmine tea. The specific jasmine tea that we're having is an amazing one that Pamela owns from China. And it also has green tea inside. And this is very popular with jasmine tea, not because the jasmine flower itself isn't extremely flavorful, but because it has no caffeine, but it can be used for things that pair well with caffeine. So one of the things that you're going to have from jasmine, just to kind of like go down the list, it's anti-inflammatory. It's high in antioxidants, as is green tea. So they're a great blend together. And then aside from that, jasmine is a healing scent. So it can be used aromatically as aromatherapy for you. You can put jasmine tea over a pot of boiling water and place a warm cloth over your face. And you can use it to kind of get those soothing benefits from you if you don't want to have it as a tea. And aside from that, it's a natural relaxant. However, different from other relaxants, it's also going to be used to clarify your mind and help you focus. So it's more of a relaxant that you can have at the beginning of the day that's not going to give you lethargy and make you tired. It's actually going to do the opposite, which is really nice because there aren't too many like natural herbs that we can find that will give you that balance. And just another reason why jasmine is so special. And I hope you guys enjoy. And I hope you
Yes.
guys enjoy.
Thank you.
Jasmine is my favorite tea in terms of flavor. Jasmine and oolong, they're both up there. I love
Yeah.
them. Maybe one day we'll have oolong.
They're
Yes.
fantastic.
Mhm.
Yeah, oolong does have a really interesting flavor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oolong, fun fact, makes me pee so much. Like immediately.
Is
on
it
top of-
just
That's
you
so
or is it
funny.
an
It's
effect?
known, yeah. Well, I won't go into it too much, but it is it's very popular for it to do that for a lot of people.
I
A lot of people look at
Oh.
oolong as like a weight loss tea. It has like a name like
Interesting.
that. But I don't want to talk too much about the oolong because we'll do an episode on
Yeah.
it.
Yeah,
and we'll
yeah.
feature it.
We'll have to find out another day.
Things to
Yes.
look forward
Find a
to.
good topic.
Also, fun fact about jasmine. I think it was some documentary that I saw. But when you said that it's also used as like a fragrance, it's one of the most expensive fragrances to harvest because of how delicate the flower is, and there's a
Mhm.
specific point when it blooms and where they cultivate it. I believe it's from India, or at least the documentary that they were talking about, the people were from India cultivating it, and it's so difficult to pick the flowers, bloom them, and they're so delicate at that stage of that bloom. But at that point, that's when the scent of the jasmine is at its peak and it's most like floral, and it's the most used, I guess, essence in perfumes, in like high quality expensive perfumes.
That's so interesting.
Mhm.
So it's like an extremely meticulous process
Yeah.
that they use.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Wow.
Mhm.
Yeah, jasmine tea is a little pricier compared to most other teas.
That's
Mhm.
true.
Yeah.
There's a reason.
Yeah.
Now we
And
know
with
where our
that
money's
kind of
going.
meticulous energy,
Mm.
I'm sure we all have some.
Bring it in. Bring it in.
Yeah. Bring it. This is where we get into the real tea.
Rope. Rope it
So, you know, our podcast is a lot of mysticism and spirituality that we talk about. And so today we kind of wanted to let you guys into our own journeys of what that spirituality and mysticism has looked like in our lives. So for the first question that I have for all of us is, what has your mystic journey looked like? How did it begin? Just to kind of give you guys some background and some information about us. So I think I'm gonna, over here on my right side, I'll go ahead and start with Tess. If you could share with us what your mystic journey has looked like.
For sure. I grew up in a Catholic household. My grandmother was actually kind of our matriarchal religious leader. And I say that very lovingly because she pretty much brought everyone together religiously. Like that was, I think, also part of her religion, bringing family together to do routine, to come together to go to church. That was part of her spirituality. And she just used the vehicle of Catholicism. And I did not like church as a kid, but I loved being with my family, so that was the compromise. And I loved actually being in school, in a Catholic school, I should say. I should have specified that. But yeah, my schooling was also private, and it was a Catholic K through 12. So I was surrounded a lot by my religion was pretty much as far as my childhood memories go, so does my family's religion. And in a private school, there's a lot of talk of spirituality, so much. There's it's also a very historical type of experience because so much of Catholicism had to do with a little sprinkle of the Roman Empire, a little sprinkle of, Judaism, right? So there's a lot of history and cultures that kind of clash and form like the very founding uh pivotal events of, Catholicism and what you study. So I had a lot of education, starting my mystic journey. It started off with, you know, it was part of my academia pretty much. I didn't separate either of those things, which commonly that's a really stark difference for a lot of people out there. I didn't see the difference between the two. So I thought of it as literally what I had to do, as easy as, waking up and taking an English class. So it was very combined with who I was as a kid. And I think my journey changed very drastically when I was also a child. Um, when I was 6 years old, which is very early on in my life as well. I lost my mom, but the change didn't really happen until I was about 10 or 11 years old. And that just goes to show you how interesting, the child brain is when you experience like very traumatic events like that. It takes a long time to process things. And one of my processes was my look on my religion and my family and everything that I think I thought of spirituality. I didn't really get that type of confidence from Catholicism that I had before. And for obvious reasons, right? The one of the, biggest archetypes in a family unit is your mom. So when Catholicism and family and education and your childhood is so mixed together and then all of a sudden like your mom gets taken out of that, a lot of these things start fraying. So they did. They frayed for me and I just discovered a few things along the line. And I still followed Catholicism because again, I was a kid and I still had my dad and my grandmother around which is why I very much refer to her as my, religious matriarch because she still led on with like an iron fist. She actually believed that was what was going to help me kind of come back and reconfigure the things that got lost when I lost my mom was religion and church and speaking to nuns and having a community there. And I don't think she was wrong, by the way, but there was definitely still something going on in my brain that didn't quite, I don't want to say believe, but feel as at home anymore, right? So I definitely, experimented and I actually, had a blessing where I kind of spoke about very briefly in tarot, where my family members were also experimenting with spirituality and mysticism. So, I didn't really stray that far. And I was blessed with some more knowledge, some more history of tarot, and some more esoteric, if you want to look at it that way, views of spirituality and religion and faith. And I think where I'm at now is definitely kind of a settlement of that. I still believe that there is, a divine body because I do believe in a lot of energies and a lot of things that speak to us. And I do think that, whatever energies, whatever spirits linger in our physical world do have a source of power, if I could put it that way. And I think that that divine body is definitely fueling a lot of the supernatural, mystic things that we experience. So that's definitely where, as plainly as I could put it, and I think as organized as I could put it, which wow, I feel like that's the first time I've actually done that. Like I've
Yeah.
explained it that way. So, wow, you guys bring out a really good side of me right now. So yeah, that's where I'm at right now, and I think that there's a lot of gray area in that. So I apologize for everybody out
Hmm.
there, but I'm still working on it. I can tell you that. I can promise everybody that I am still very much working on clarifying and um making the gray a little less muggy. Yeah.
So you really enjoyed Catholic school?
I did. Okay, look.
Sorry, I had to ask.
I
Love
did.
that.
I did not like people. I will tell you that because I should take that back and be more specific. I did not like the kids my age. I loved my teachers. I
I see.
loved my principal. My librarian eventually became my principal. I loved all the things that, people took care of the kids in private school. And not to say anything about public school, but I just felt like there was, and there's also mm, that financial aspect that I know private schools have, right, an advantage over on. So I'm also considering that, but it was a great experience. And I did like, the women and yeah. the women. I loved the women in Catholic school.
And sorry, just another follow up question. So, did you do Catholic school for all of your schooling, like up until high school?
No, I was in Catholic school until I was in third grade. I finished third grade. I was 9, and I was put into public school for
I
that
see.
financial reason.
Mm-hmm.
And I started public school at fourth grade. So I started at an elementary school. I finished there, finished my fifth grade there, and then I continued on into public school from then. And I graduated from public school, which I'm very
Okay.
happy about as well.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. I get it now. It was Catholic school when you were little. So I feel like
Yes.
school when you're little, for the most part,
Foundational. Yeah, that's why she
is
had a
more
nice
fun.
perspective.
Exactly.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing, Tess. What about you, Caitlin?
Yeah. I am really, so this is a really hard question for me, my friends. I think that for me on my mystic journey, I'm really happy with where I'm at now, but I think that I had a lot of darkness like getting to where I'm at. So I was raised Christian. My family was predominantly Baptist Christian, and I was raised that way all through school and until I was like a senior in high school. And then that's like just where my awareness, I would really say like when I was a junior in high school. And so just to give a little bit of background to like what my life looked like, I was always in um like Sunday school. And when I got a little bit more involved in the church around middle school, high school, then I started going to church multiple days a week, volunteering, doing missions trips, because all of these things, like as you're at church, they just anyone who's gone to like a Christian church would know that these things just become part of your everyday, right? Everyone is doing it, so you all do it together. And so I was at church multiple days a week, right? Or having meetings like within to meet up with people. And so very quickly, my social circle at church became larger than my social circle in school. And I was still very involved in things in school too. That's just how things evolved because I had a really closed minded perspective of what I was looking for from people. And so I think that in high school, it ultimately served me well because it kept me away from a lot of things that maybe otherwise, right, if I didn't have the structure of church and like having other things to look forward to, I could have very well gotten maybe into some other things. I like to think that I'm always who I am,
Mhm.
but who knows? And so when I graduated high school, I made the choice. I even remember the conversation with my mom to go to a non denominational Christian church. I just felt like I had been going to the same church my entire life. I knew that there was more out there. I felt like I myself had reached a point where I was ready to expand, and really just hear some new perspectives about the same piece of text, right? About the same Bible. And so I did that and I went to this incredible church that was non denominational. And I was surprised at how similar I thought that it still was. It's just that we were talking about some, in my opinion, some deeper truths that opened up some new questions for me. And it kind of led me down this path of, I just started to ask a lot of different questions for myself. And I found that the answers that I was getting from Christianity as a religion just were not enough for me. They weren't servicing me. And that kind of like became my trickle into realizing that it's not that there's anything wrong with Christianity, but I look at it in the same way that it's not that there's anything wrong with Catholicism, that there's wrong with Buddhism, with Judaism, with Hinduism. I just think that they're all a means to find and tap into something that we know that we all have in common. And I thought that that realization was really beautiful. And it set me free from a lot of chains that I felt I was holding on to
Yeah.
because there were so many things that I felt like as a Christian, I was told weren't right.
Mhm.
And I was told, like, you can't hate, but also these things are really, really bad.
Yeah.
So then when I do them, I was naturally hating myself right? Every time I quote unquote sinned and I felt like I needed to ask for forgiveness. And then that feeling of asking for forgiveness felt so repetitive. And then it didn't feel like anything at all, really. That's really what started to make my shift, because I was like, well, is this the only way? And so, yeah, so it started with just a lot of research and starting to open up and looking into other philosophies, starting with religions, right? And then opening up more towards concepts, ideologies, looking more at philosophers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Stoicism, oof, such a good one that like really changed a lot about the way that I see the world. And even cynicism. I think that cynics were some really, really intelligent people and they were onto certain things. And that's where the fun of my mystic journey started to happen. I think that once I accepted that I was going to be okay after leaving the church, I was able to really just immerse myself in what called to me, as opposed to feeling like I needed to continue searching for answers. And I would say, similarly to Tess, like it's something that I'm still working on today, but I would say that what I clung to is still what I cling to today, is how do I answer my own questions, right? I'm not looking to tackle all of life's questions. I'm looking to handle what's right in front of me. And I take that as my own stepping stones as I move forward. Every lesson kind of comes to me. I don't really look for them. And
That's such a good way to put it, by the way. So thank you for
yeah, of
that. Yeah.
course. I think it's just like trial and error, as
Mhm.
things come, right? You come to a point where you realize life is too
Mhm.
busy for me to spend this much time for focusing on things that are outside of my perception. And I think there's a lot of freedom in that, because then my spirituality went from being this like giant thing that I couldn't grasp to now being something that's like in the palm of my hand. It's very small, it's very intimate, and it's in my own speed.
Yeah.
In hearing the both of you, and I think this would call for another episode. But when you were talking about the whole asking for forgiveness and then you're doing this constantly, and at the end of the day, does it even mean anything? That's a lot of what the kind of lines of questionings that I had, at least with religion. So I was raised Catholic, very superficially, like very I didn't go to Catholic
Like
school.
culturally.
Yeah, so a lot of what I would do, it was just because it was tradition. Like my families were doing it because it was the ritual. I didn't do Catholic school, and I think it's because my parents, especially my mom, tried really hard to allow us to embrace the American culture and integrate in that way, because they did, come from Peru, and a lot of I think almost everybody in my family in Peru has done Catholic school, so I think that's a huge difference. But when we would go to church, it would be on Sundays, and it would just be because you had to. There was no explanation of why you had to go. And I think that's where I started questioning a lot of it, because I was told you have to do these things just because they're good, and there was no other reason why, and there was no other reasoning given to me. And I remember maybe I was like 10 or 13, but I remember when I discovered that there was a King James version of the Bible. And I was like, I'm sorry, wait, there's a version written by a king? So then what, like, which Bible do people go by? What? And then I learned that there was another king. What was it? I don't know which King Henry, but the one who changed also the Bible so he can get a divorce.
Mm-hmm.
So then it became something of like, so how can I be following something that has been changed by other people? What do I know to be the truth? And how do I know that something is bad or truly bad, or why I shouldn't be doing something just because some external force says otherwise, right? And when you were talking, Caitlin, about something bigger than yourself, and now it's something that you can kind of hold in the palm of your hand, I feel like that's also something that I struggled a lot with, because I would see a lot of people who would really dive into religion and be very zealous, right, to that extremity.
Yeah.
And it was something that I could never really feel attached to or close to, because it just logically didn't make sense in my head. And I will say that when I was younger, I started going to a Christian after school care program. And there on Fridays, they had the youth groups. And it was in those youth groups where I started to feel some of that spirituality. But the main time that I would feel it was when they would be playing the music, right? And singing all of those songs.
Oh yeah,
But
it has a
then,
hold.
yeah. And then,
I still sing some of those songs, honestly.
right.
Yeah.
But as soon as, well, now, right, reflecting back and looking at it, I remember seeing a post that said, did I have a religious spiritual experience or did I just enjoy the music? Because somebody who thought it was God and that relationship to God is what gave them that impactful sense of spirituality, they went to a concert and they felt the same thing. So they're like, is it God or is it the music? Right.
So true.
And so that was the only time that I felt it. At least any aspects of spirituality, because again, my upbringing was mainly just tradition, right? We put Jesus in the little you put baby Jesus at midnight, you
Yeah,
uncover him,
the
you say the little
nativity
prayer,
set,
thank
right?
you.
Yeah,
The
yeah. The
nativity set.
nativity set.
We go to church, you every time you drive by the church, you say amen. Like I don't even know the direction that you should be doing it in. I'm a very bad Catholic. But
It's okay, I am
Tisk,
too.
tisk.
yeah.
I
At least
forget
you went to
too.
Catholic
I would
school.
do it wrong at church. So
My mom would always joke with me that with me and my sister that we were still little devils because we never got like fully baptized, because you get like a full, what is it? You get a full baptism after Catholic school or you finish or something,
Yeah, yeah.
and your communion and all of that.
oh, a confirmation. Yeah.
That,
Yeah.
see,
No,
I
I,
don't.
I never did it either.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, we're bad. We can be bad Catholics together. So yeah, so I mean, most of my mystic journey really wasn't much of a mystic journey until later in life when I became older and I started learning about different Eastern religions, right? Like Buddhism, like Shintoism, like Jainism. And I only learned about those things because I was interested in the Japanese language. And then there became another aspect where religion wasn't just something that was taught to me and was shoved down my throat and I have to follow it without asking any question why. It suddenly became a part of people's culture. And that aspect of religion interested me. And I remember as I was going through college, trying to juggle the concept between religion versus spirituality and the differences between the two. And I think as I was going through college, I kind of came to the definition that religion is more structured and it's really there to help bring order to a society, whereas spirituality is something where it becomes something of your relationship with whatever religion that you aspire to, right? Or whatever religion that you follow. And it also reminds me of a conversation that I had with a friend of mine where she was struggling with this concept of why do I have to go to church to love God and to have my own personal relationship with God? Like, why can't I just speak to God from my own bedroom? Why does it have to be these specific paths? And I remember having that conversation with her and telling her, I don't think you have to go to church or have to confess your sins to a priest, but don't take my word for it because I'm not really a Catholic. But, at the end of the day, I think a lot of the times religion is twisted to get people to do what they want. And it's not the true definition of what that spirituality should look like. And that's kind of where the journey has taken me, right? It's questioning that difference between religion and spirituality, especially because I wasn't very forced into learning it and practicing Catholicism. And as I grew older and I started learning more, right, and broadening my perspective, is when I started realizing maybe Western religion is not something I personally align with, and I'm sure there's other scriptures that were also written by people. A lot of this is just what we believe in and what we choose to believe in, because at the end of the day, it's just scripture written by man, by human. So I think it's kind of crazy to me sometimes when I see some of these overzealous followers and how they don't accept anything other than their own, which is a little sad, but that's kind of deviating from the point. But yeah, so that's kind of how my journey has looked. Um, and I guess that I'll just lead it into and start us off for our next one of a pivotal change that has affected or impacted our journey, right? And so I kind of had small changes, as I mentioned earlier, realizing that there's several versions of the Bible edited by people who wanted to change the law, essentially. Um, but I think a big change for me happened when I met this lady right here next to me on my right, Miss Tess,
Heyo.
because when we met, the group of people that we were surrounded by were into these types of conversations, and included in that was the esoteric spirituality. As we mentioned before, that's how we kind of got into tarot, as at least that's how I got into tarot as well. And one of the tutors that we worked with, he was very into the esoteric, right? And so opening that door and having those kinds of conversations with him really opened my eyes to a different world of spirituality. And I learned things about different concepts, right? Like the Wheel of Fortune, the Ouroboros, and how that symbolizes the cycle of life, and learning some of the history behind tarot. And it wasn't really until all of this to say that this led up into the pandemic when lockdown happened, right? This was pretty much at the cusp of when I was starting to really pique my interest into spirituality and the esoteric. And at that point, my father got sick with COVID right at the beginning. So s- lockdown was pretty much happening towards the end of March. And he was a part of that first wave of people who got sick. And it was a very terrifying time. I remember seeing and I apologize ahead of time if this triggers anybody, lockdown was very hard for a lot of people. Um, but it was at that time where it really affected my journey, because it gave me the time to really dive in and immerse myself in all that is spiritual and the potential practices and all of these things. And I got really into crystals and learning about crystals and believing in their power. And one of the biggest moments that I had that really solidified my spiritual journey and made me shift into this idea and this world of tarot and spirit and the universe. Um, that's how I like to call it. Was when I was doing yoga. So I was doing a 30-day yoga challenge by Yoga with Adrienne. She's amazing. If you want to get into yoga, she has this 30-day journey home that is really beautiful. She does an amazing job of gently guiding you home through yoga practice. And it was during one of her sessions that I was in my room. My dad was probably either in the hospital or locked in his room. I don't remember at what point, but I was doing the yoga practice. And there was one point when we're laying down, it was towards the end. And she had said to kind of bring your knees in, hug yourself. And I can't remember the exact words that she said, but it was somewhere on the lines of like, take a moment to notice that it's just you and your mat and you have your back. And it was a lot of narration of gratitude. And I remember vividly thinking that as I closed my eyes and was hugging my knees, I remember picturing me, a smaller version of myself, essentially my inner child. And she was locked in like a dark room, curled up, crying, hugging her knees to her chest, right? The same way that I was, just on the floor. Um, and I was just looking at her, and it was such a revelation for me because I struggled with depression when I was younger. From middle school till high school. High school kind of went away, then it came back around my freshman year of college. Like I thought I had beat it, but it came back. And so one of the visualizations I remember having while I was depressed is me in a hole and seeing a lot of people walking by, right? And I felt like I would be screaming for help and yelling for help, and nobody would hear me. And all somebody had to do was reach out because I was just barely short enough that I couldn't pull myself out. So I would be calling for help and wanting somebody to just reach down and lend me their hand so I can pull myself out. And so seeing myself in that dark room and hugging myself metaphorically and visually in my mind, it was such a full circle moment, and that's really where it's impacted my journey so much, where that opened the floodgates to this overwhelming feeling of self-love. And so much now that I have boundaries that I set for myself in my relationships with people, um, where I try to prioritize myself and my wellness. And it really helped me for the rest of lockdown to put myself first and start making a lot healthier meals and realizing that the only person I needed to pull myself out of that hole was myself, and that was super powerful. And I cried so much during that yoga session, because I was like, poor Pam, poor little Pam. Like all she needed was me. And I feel like a lot of the times, well, at least on my feed, I see a lot of be the person that you wished you wanted or that you had when you were little, and it was so much that moment. And that has changed my journey forever, because at the end of the day, if I can't depend on religion or a scripture or whatever, I know that I can depend on myself and I'll always be there for myself. So, yeah, that was my pivotal moment.
That's beautiful, Pam.
Thank you.
Yeah. I love how you incorporated so much physicality into spirituality.
Yeah.
It's kind of going back to, a lot of the things that Kat has also talked about, in terms of like running and actually having oneness, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how many times I've heard a yoga instructor say, like, it's you and your breath,
Yeah.
right? Like, it's you, like, you know the limits, or um, stay in the moment because.
Well, good yoga instructors.
Good, yeah, right. Good yoga instructors. Like, be in the moment because you need to feel this stretch in your hamstring while you're doing downward dog, right? Like, be in the moment because, your back hurts while you're in child's pose. So
Right.
I think it's so grounding.
Or even
Right.
recognizing your own power, because a lot of those really good yoga instructors will tell you, use your breath, use your breath to help you alleviate that pain. Visualize sending that breath to where that pain is at and that stretch, and just stretch a little further,
Right.
and it's just that self realization and that self actualization of, bitch, I don't need anybody.
Yeah.
I just need me.
Yeah. Smile if you hate what you're doing. Right?
a good
Yoga
one.
instructors say, smile. You'll feel better about this
So
stretch.
true.
Yeah.
Slight smile.
Yeah. What about you, Caitlin?
I just want to say that was also the best, like, non-sponsored advertisement for anyone to do yoga with Adrian,
Yeah.
because you sold it for anyone if they haven't actually tried it yet before. But yes, I love her.
I love her too.
And Pam and I were going on that journey together because neither of us had ever completed a yoga journey before. And we were nervous about telling each other to begin with because we knew it meant that was going to force us to be accountable towards each other.
Mm-hmm.
And it ended really, really well for both of us, clearly.
Yeah.
So I think that the pivotal change for me with my spirituality, right? I already said that I broke out from like my religious upbringing at around like beginning of college. So I was 21. I was working at a restaurant, and one of my coworkers, she was a woman. She wasn't old, but she was definitely like one of the older coworkers. I respected her because I always respect my elders, and she was somebody who at this job was seen as like, oh, you don't mess with her, right? We're servers. We have little sections that we take care of. She has her section. She doesn't really do small talk with people. She's kind of just in and out and does her work. And I was working there for just a few months. And I had that type of personality where she respected my work ethic. Therefore, she wanted to talk to me. And she would do like almost little favors for me too as a server. And she even gave me a lot of like tips on how to be, not tips like physical tips, like not money tips, but she gave me advice on how to be a better server and how to be more assertive as a server, right? How to like kind of, because sometimes you show people who you are, right? And I wasn't recognizing that because I was still so young. And we were having a conversation one day at the end of our shift, and we started talking about spirituality. And I told her about how I was Christian, but right now I really didn't believe in anything because I had just broken out of that. So I didn't really trust that the ideas that I had were valid. I have this feeling, that there's something that I can connect to and that there's something that's working in my better good, but I really don't feel comfortable saying that it's God. I don't feel comfortable. I'm trying not to even think about it. And she was like, well, I hear you. I hear your pain from growing up that way, and you're totally valid. There's someone who helped me. And she tells me about Don Miguel Ruiz, who I know at this point I've already talked about on our podcast. So this is the way that I was exposed to him the first time. So she tells me about this man, and she says, he's incredible. She doesn't say much more. She was just like, he's incredible. His book changed my life. It is pretty popular, but a lot of people haven't heard of it. And if you want to, I think that you would really enjoy it and what he has to say. And she was like, I have a copy. I would love to lend it to you. Let me know if you're interested. And at the moment, I told her, I really appreciate you like taking this time. Right now, I don't think it's what I'm looking for, but thank you for offering. And so naturally, as what happens when people sense that you need something, I went home. I told my boyfriend about her offering this to me. I did no research on the guy, and I just lingered with these same thoughts, right? I couldn't stop thinking about this book that she had offered. Also, she's my coworker, right? So like I would still talk to her, and it came to the point where I started feeling bad that I knew she had offered me this book and I was still seeing her at work. And so one day I was in a good mood and I was like, remember that book that you had asked me if I was interested in reading? I think I'd like to read it. I think that I'm down to read a book right now. Let me see it. I would love, if you're still willing to let me borrow it, I'd love to borrow it. She brought it the next day. And I read the first chapter in like 15 minutes. And I was like, is this a joke? Because the way that the book words itself, the way that he words himself as a writer is so simplistic. There's no large vocabulary. The ideas are so finite. They're right in front of you. The way that he words these things, and a lot of the way that he words it is as if it's a truth you've always known. And so I was reading the first chapter, and I've never, at this point, I haven't dived into anything non-religious. I've only dived,
Dove?
question
Dove
mark?
dividend.
You let me know. But I had only really immersed myself in religious texts, right? As I was searching. So here was the first time where, at least up to what I knew, right? This man is not he does not associate himself with any religion. He has his own way that he was raised, right? He was a Toltec shaman for his entire life. So those are his principles and ideals, which is great because they are not a part of the Western culture. So that was refreshing. And I was blown away at what I read after the first chapter. I put the book away and I didn't want to read anymore. I felt like it was as if I was reading the Bible, where the words were so simple, but they were so loaded with ideas, and my mind was racing. And long story short, I ended up doing that with the entire book. The name of the book was called The Voice of Knowledge, which I thought was really interesting because it's not traditionally the first book that he has. So I think it's really special that that was the first book that I was exposed to, was The Voice of Knowledge. And The Voice of Knowledge is referred to as that, what we would associate when we say that we can speak with God and that we can talk to God, or that God is speaking to us, showing us signs. That's what you could say is the voice of knowledge. Because when we hear those signs, right, they're both good and bad. And it's up to us to discern what they are. So the book tackled that. And it was exactly what I needed in that moment, because I needed something to justify that that voice is still there even after I've disassociated myself from a religion, right? And I grew up, fun fact, what Pam was speaking on about how there's a separation between dogma and relationship, so religion and spirituality. As a Christian, I grew up with that. As a Christian, a Baptist Christian, from the moment I got into middle school, they were like, you have to have a relationship. It's about your spirituality as well. You can learn all of the Bible stories and know all of the trivia, but we also want to make sure you're developing a relationship with God. And so as a Christian, I always grew up with the mentality that, like, oh, I'm so lucky because my religion gives me both. So I don't have to worry about exploring my spirituality somewhere else. And so that was the one thing that I thought I was going to miss the most in leaving. But I kind of knew that I would carry it with me. I just didn't know where to place it. And so that was the big thing that I think I got from that first text. And it's what led me to reading his entire other stream of books, and has also led me to reading Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu,
Hmm.
the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. There are so many beautiful texts out there that, again, are not associated with religion. They're associated with the idea that we all believe in something more. And that was the first one for me. You know, it was my catalyst, and it's what gave me, for the first time, peace in not attaching myself to something, that I really could just be who I am and that that would be enough. And up until then, I think I felt a lot of shame for essentially rejecting the way that I was raised. And it made me realize that I rejected it the same way that you reject an illness from your body. You know, it was not what was going to serve me and who I am. And it definitely impacted the way I see things now. You know, now I choose spiritual texts very particularly, I would say. I know what I need and what works for me. And I'm always open to recommendations when I see that they're being given in love, you know, and you really see that there's something I can benefit from. And I enjoy that more than anything else. Also, I think as we get older, we have no time to waste. So you have to be very intentional with
Oh,
the
yeah,
choices that you make.
absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, I think it would be nice for us. Uh, so, an idea that we've been wanting to have is to have a book series. So, maybe one of those texts is what we have for the book series.
Oh,
Um,
totally.
yeah,
I
that
know
would be
just the
amazing.
one.
Ooh, I'm excited. Um, and also just to like add on to what you were saying, I think there's also no shame, right, in exploring different kinds of scriptures and different kinds of texts. And I think once you broaden that perspective that you have, I don't know if you found in what you've read, but I feel like even in doing some research in just different kinds of religions, at its essence and at its core, a lot of it follows the same thing, right? It's just about being a good person
Absolutely.
and having love and acting in love. And everybody, even if it has a different name, it's all a force and energy outside of yourself, bigger than yourself, to help us as humans explain and understand concepts that may be beyond ourselves,
And we
right?
do it in so many other ways in life. We do it so simply, right? You never, when you are really going to spend money on something, or you're going to be spending a lot of time on something, you always do the research to find out what's the best option
Yeah, and you
for
look at
you.
reviews.
But when it comes to religion, we're so judgmental of what everyone else is doing, that we don't take the time to just learn and understand
Yeah.
why they've chosen that, right? Or what's valid within it. Because I agree, you find all of the similarities and how they're all interconnected by the same goal.
Yeah, and if it works for somebody, don't take it personal. That's what works for them. Then not
Yeah.
everybody has to follow the same path. That would be so boring. You know, this is the reason why we're here. It's to have all of these varied experiences, spirituality and religion included. You know, you look like you got a pondering face,
She's
Tess. What
mulling.
about
She's
you?
mulling.
I do. I do. I had, because it's funny because you brought up what Pam had said, and that was also my reaction. Like I was thinking like, oh, my church and my school was also really big about, how do you live with God, right? This is text, sure, but how do you live with God? Which is what, it's their words, right? They didn't use spirituality. They were more like, how do you live with God every day, right? And I'll tell you that, to answer the question of like, what is my pivotal moment that changed my pivotal moment, I guess it didn't have to change, but it definitely pivoted my spiritual journey. It was actually in one of those lessons in my Catholic schooling, where we had a whole period dedicated to religion, and it was in the smack in the middle of our day, right? And one of the most important things in that class was to turn in the Sunday bulletin signed by your parents and the priest that held the church, right, session that day. And that was, yes.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What's a Sunday bulletin?
It's like a pamphlet is the best way I can put it. It's like an agenda. It's think of it as like I'm losing the word.
A planner?
No.
Because
Like,
I know.
Outline?
Is it agenda?
no. It's like, well, I'm trying to
A
think.
brochure?
No. Oh my god. So what it was kind of which is why I kind of feel a little bit crossed in saying no to agenda, because it did have the schedule of the mass for the next week to come, right? Because Sunday, by the way, in our Christian calendar, right, that we have, it's the first day of the week because that's the first day of the week. Whereas, like, I guess on layman's terms, we always think of it as the last day because it's the last day of the weekend, but really it's the opposite for a lot of Christians out there. So they hand out this calendar on the Sunday mass, and it's not, I can't even say calendar. It's not a calendar, but it's like, what is that thing that people mail out? And it's
Newsletter.
newsletter.
Gotcha.
Thank you. God, it's like a newsletter for the church. It was a physical piece of paper that they gave out at the end of mass. And because the church was right in front of my school, the priest would they would make an announcement like, oh, the priest has, signed bulletins on the side, the students can come and pick them up, right? And a lot of the times those newsletters, right, they would be basically our grade for Monday morning. Did you go to church Sunday? Right.
Wow.
And there were a lot of weekends that I didn't have one to turn in, especially after my mom had passed away. And, my grandma tried as she did, right? She was older, and she didn't have the energy to come and pick us up and take us to church herself. She had her limitations. So it was really up to my dad. And my dad had his own personal reasons why he didn't want to go to church too. So there were a lot of weekends where I didn't have, a bulletin, and I would get a talking to by my nun who led the lesson. And she was so kind, honestly. She was so understanding. She was also the same religion teacher for my brother. So she knew, everybody in that school knew what we were going through. And because they knew my mom, right? So they were so understanding and they were so kind. And I did get a failing grade because they had to. They were teachers as well. But I was never judged by them. And there were even times where my favorite librarian, right, who was a principal, would turn one in for me. Like she gave one for me signed. So, that just again goes back to the women of the school really made it for me. And there was one time where my friend, at the moment, who I thought she was my friend, made a comment really loudly and explicitly, about me not having a signed Sunday bulletin. And I thought to myself that that was one of the most hurtful things I had experienced, because it was kind of a judgment on not only me but my family, right? And she said something that, I mean, you're it's going to be silly because it's a child speaking as well, right? We were 8. um so it'll sound really harsh, but she was a child, right? And me as a grown woman, I understand that. So she said that, God doesn't know her family because they don't go to church. That's what she said, like in her sentence. And as an 8-year
Wow.
old, I was devastated.
Yeah.
And then I went home and I kind of thought to myself, like, well, if God doesn't know me, then I don't know God. So it was, anger. Again, going back to Tessa's brand, anger is a big motivator for her. So I just kind of decided, like, you know what? Which also plays into the fact that I was still angry about my mom dying. So many people had said, like, oh, God's going to heal her, God's going to take care of her. And then this came, and I was like, God doesn't have a dang foot to stand on to be mad at me. So that just kind of furled into just more anger. And I guess her saying that just, again, pivotal. It just sparked my anger completely. And I rejected a lot. And then fast forward the next year, I was taken out, actually 2 years later, because I finished 3rd grade, but I was taken out and I was put into public school. And my rejection had just kind of grown, even though I was going to school every day because I loved school and I loved my teachers, but religion was just kind of a blur. Like, I remember more about my lesson on like Charlotte's Web than I do about any Bible chapter, you know? Because again, it was school first and foremost, and religion was only one part of the day. But my relationship with God was really skewed because it was an angry relationship where I thought of a man, right? Because this is kind of the lore that we're given, right? Especially Catholicism, we're given the idea of two men, God and Jesus, and they both need your undying dedication. And I just kept feeling like, they made me a promise and they didn't keep it. So that's all I kept on going back to, you know? And then there were times where even I tried to like bargain with them. Like, I know you didn't do this thing for me, right? But could you do this thing for me? And it was smaller things. And then that didn't happen. So I was just continuing that rejection. And fast forward to college, where that another pivotal moment happened. And by the way, I had just kind of kept that rejection of Catholicism and growing this other spirituality with tarot, with pretty much like Wiccans, with pagans, right? Finding the history behind all that religion too, because opening myself to other religions was in itself pivotal. I'll tell you, like going to public school kind of opened my eyes, like, oh, not everybody's Catholic. Oh, not everybody believes this one thing. So I kind of, again, opened myself to, okay, not everybody's going to judge me, right? So it opened myself to people, opened myself to other people's perspective, right? And not being afraid that I'm going to just relive that same judgment, right, in that 8-year-old body again and again and again from different people. So that was a relief. And um, when I was in college, I actually met a professor who he's a really good friend of mine right now, and him and his wife have definitely helped me in my spirituality and my connection to God. Funny enough, because he would tell me that his name is Alex, his two favorite religious figures are Jesus and Buddha. So he loves Jesus and he loves Buddha. And he would actually talk to me about, same conversations, like, about my past, about my life. And his wife was, less about scripture and more about being kind and just living on your morals. And she was also extremely sharing in the fact that her family also came from a very traditional, Christian background. So it was extremely helpful. And one thing that I remember he told me is that, because, we were talking about this, and I was sharing things that, had happened to me in this realm of Christianity and this realm of like judgment and hierarchy, right, in religion. And I was also, of course, scarred by the very real current events that were happening that had to do with the Catholic Church. You're right. Like, we all know the fact that there's a really big problem, right, with priests and covering crimes up and things that, are not and should not be. I guess I'm being really pointed with that, like, should not be accepted by any religious organization or passed over. But that's happening, right? And he kind of listened to me and he was like, I hear you, Tess. And just remember that at the end of the day, Jesus washed, poor people's feet. He wasn't sitting in an auditorium like priests do. He was sitting on a rock surrounded by dirt and other rocks and people sitting on the ground. And no matter what the institution looks like now, it's always going to come back to what opens your heart and what centers your life and inspires you to be a good person, right? Like we hinted at before. And that his conversation with me kind of brought me back to Catholicism in a very kind way. And I say Catholicism just because it's kind of the placeholder, but it really just brought me back to my religion that I had as a kid. And I no longer looked back at myself cruelly. And I no longer looked back at myself like, oh, you didn't know any better. Because I was, I was rejecting it and I was thinking like, oh, she followed religion, like what a dumbass, right? But now it's more kinder. And I'm thankful for those conversations that, even my religious teacher had, because there were questions that I don't think kids were being asked of. Opinions about the world and opinions about, what is love and how do you live with love in your heart every day? And I don't think there's like a quiet moment like that for a lot of kids in their homes or outside of it. So I was really thankful for that. And even if it was through the lens of a very Western religion, it was at the basis of it, right? Silent moments where you just think about things that you want or things that you hope for or things that you're afraid of. And sure, they say, yeah, it's a conversation with God. But I realized this whole time I was practicing meditation. I was practicing, my ethics. I was thinking about what is right and what is wrong on a daily, if not weekly basis. I was so encouraged to be reflective, right? Which I don't think a lot of people are, even in their adulthood. And maybe some people that even when they're asked to do it as part of the religion, don't do it well. Or they just do it because, right, they're supposed to, right?
Right.
And they don't give it the appropriate attention, right? So I'm also taking that into consideration. Um, but I was brought back in a very kind and non-judgmental way. And he also encouraged me to read the Quran, which, by the way, I had never even thought of because I was also a kid who grew up in 9/11, in the shadow of 9/11. So there's always that like glance or very limited perspective of, just don't look that way, right? Because they did that. But it's like, no. Who, first of all, who's
They
they?
could say the same about us.
Yes, exactly. Like, first of all, who's they? Second of all, it's like kind of thinking about that one 8-year-old girl in that class is the entire Catholic Church. That's like me doing that, right? Like, how unreasonable is that,
Yeah.
So I definitely thought about it a lot. And the Tehran, even, he had both of those texts right in his office, and we talked a lot about that. But he was really encouraging, and he was always somebody who, I guess, I don't want to say challenged, but he made me question a lot, you know? And he even questioned a lot of the things that he studied. He would say that, as a joke a lot of the times, like, yeah, I'm reading the Quran, but it's gonna be more questions. I'm not gonna get any answers. He was very open to, never finding the finite, which is, I guess, why I'm okay with living in gray, um, because of him. So those are definitely two pivotal moments for me. That was kind of an ejection, right, from one thing that I knew, and then a kind, slow merging back, being, you know, even opening a new perspective on my own religion, right? Which is something I thought of, like, why am I so willing to look at so many religions with such an open perspective and not the one I grew up with and know the most about, right? Like, have the most context to do so for. So,
It's very true.
yeah.
You know what I thought of when you said that that teacher friend of yours was saying it's gonna bring more questions than anything. Way back when, right? With the Romans and Greeks and the philosophers, and even in Eastern society with the philosophers there and the scholars, it was so highly regarded to ask those questions and think about why and question everything. And all of a sudden there's this 180 change where no, you just have to follow, and you can't ask any questions, and you just have to do it because that's what it is, and that's the way that it is, and you can't question it. Like, I think that philosophy to me is very interesting. I'm sure there's some scholar with a doctoral degree, maybe, who has looked into that and the history of that. Um, but I just feel like a lot of it comes down to control. And so it's important to ask those questions, right? And like how you were saying, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to limit your own religion. Maybe Catholicism is what speaks to you, but you can still practice it the way that you want it, right? And still, I guess, paying homage to the tradition and all of that, but not following so strictly and so blindly, because it is so important to ask those questions and be deeply reflective. I think, especially now, we were fortunate enough that we grew up and had some part of our childhood without electronics. But the new generation, all they've known is electronics and being stimulated and having to scroll through, what do they call it? The zombie scroll, the dead scroll, I don't even know anymore.
Doom
The doom
scrolls.
scroll, all these
Got
different
many
words, right?
names.
But there's there's no attention span for that. There's nothing that you're thinking about. You're watching these people wear clothes. Oh, you should buy this. Oh, you should buy that. Oh, look, get this. And then you get the sense of, I want to have that lifestyle. I want to live that life. And then there's this longing, but there's no deep reflection, and for some of those people who don't know how, I know that there's a lot of great journals out there who could help with that. Even in the tarot episode, I mentioned how tarot can be used as a reflection tool, and so far I've noticed that a lot of the episodes that we talked about so far have had reflection right in there, um, just to show how important that can be and how pivotal those questions to ask are. And don't feel guilty about asking them, because that's the reason, right? You're exploring. There's nothing wrong with exploring. I'm sure Jesus
Mhm.
didn't say like, "Oh, you can't try to play with fire." He lets you play with fire, and then when it burns you, then you figure out you can't touch it anymore. you know.
Yeah.
But
Which is funny you mentioned that, because one of the biblical stories is God in a burning bush. So,
yeah, I was thinking about that one, but I don't know the full story, so
there
I
you
didn't
go.
mention it.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
Moses, baby.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing to us. Yeah.
Of course.
Um, and that actually leads us, I know you kind of talked about even now, how you're okay with being in that gray area. But that also leads us to our last question, to what is the journey now and where is it going? And what are potential things that you're looking to explore? So I know that you mentioned that you're comfortable with the gray now. Do you have an idea of what you want to explore or where you think the journey is going to take you?
Yeah, I recently started, and I guess recently is too kind of a word, but in 2021, I started going back to church every odd Sunday. It wasn't a routine, right? It wasn't anywhere near as devoted as I was back when I was a kid, but I was just revisiting the idea because I missed very basic moments of church, like sermons priests would give. I enjoyed those for the most part, you know. Um, and I enjoyed just kind of sitting in a room with so much focus and attention. And I also enjoyed kind of seeing, where, the attention would fray out. And because I would relate to that, like there's so many like kids in church that are just there because again they're told to, and it's interesting to see them also hyper focus and then stray away when they do, which is fine. That's part of the story, right? um and I started going to my mom's grave a lot more too, because that's a place where I would only go with my family. I would only go because it was her birthday, because it was Mother's Day, because it was the anniversary of her death. And I just decided that, like church, I didn't want to treat it as just a weird special occasion, like I had to do this, because that's not what my mom is. And her grave is definitely not a limit to me celebrating her. So I started making odd visits on just days that I wanted to go. And I would take my journal with me and I would spend hours there. Um, Hours is kind of exaggerating because I would go there after work, so I didn't have a lot of time. But I would go there for definitely just longer than, what my family would do. Like, oh, let's put flowers, say a prayer, and then leave, right? I would stay there much more. I would talk to her more, which in turn I would spend a lot more time with myself. And I started really dedicating a space for her, especially because now, since I moved out of my home and I have my own space, I'm more particular about where I put her photo and creating an altar for her. And that's something that I'm kind of focusing on now. How do I bring things that, whether they be from routines of Catholicism or routines of spirituality and tarot, for example, or meditation, how do I bring them every day and not just, oh, it's 5 o'clock, now I need to meditate, right? And a big part of that was seeking out therapy, right? And not just, saying, okay, I need to do this because I have to, but taking it with me in my growth and my definition of my value. And I think that's something that people learn from religion, right? Your value and your foundation of existence. And when you're someone who's kind of balancing and wobbling on a circle on a plank, right? And you're like, and you don't have any of those things because for whatever reason you left and you rejected it for so long, and now you're coming back and reformulating this thing in your head. Um, I decided to make daily routines mean much more, as much as I can, because even if it means deciding that I want to focus my attention on people, right? Um, I want to think about that person a little bit more consciously. So I don't want it to be, well, I'm going to text Kat because it's her birthday, you know? No, I want to text Kat because I want to text Kat, like, period. And I think sometimes it's hard to say, okay, well, where is that going to take you? Well, I don't know, because a lot of it also depends on other people, right? Like, I will tell you and also be very honest and say that continuing to go to church every odd moon has been kind of relieving because it's a little spontaneous, just like it is like, I'm just gonna text Kat today because it's my thought right now. Let's write it, like, yeah. So it is a lot of spontaneity right now. There's nothing too structured because where I am in my life, I think my structure is dedicated to other places that are a little bit more urgent, just in very, necessary terms, not because I need to be more focused on like meal planning or anything. I just feel like it's like, no, I just need rent paid. So
Yep.
there's those things, there's those things that need more attention right now. Um, but I've always thought about how to be better at journaling, be better at tarot, because I think my spirituality, although like I don't want anybody to think like the message is you move away from Western, very um, very fixed ideas of religion like Christianity or Catholicism, and then you go to esoteric. Like, yes, this is the answer. Like, no, not really, because I will admit that even tarot and my belief and my systems within even crystals and meditation has frayed as well now, right? But they've both suffered because when you have a spiritual disconnect, it's hard to dedicate anything to that much faith, with that much faith, I should say. So reestablishing that faith is probably what I'm going to be working on. There are things that have happened in life recently that have jarred me a little bit more. So paying attention to myself comes first, right? Reflection, whether it be through visiting, my mom and having those moments of peace in or outside of a church session, um, focusing on things that, like what Pam was kind of alluding to before, hurt you and have happened to you. That's definitely what I'm focusing on too, because which we'll probably talk about more of, those things deeply affect how you pave this trek on this planet. So that is taking a lot of priority right now. So paying attention to my past more, whether it be through the eyes of religion, that's definitely where my journey is going, because I feel like I'm finding out a lot more from myself about myself. Yeah.
When you were saying that you're just going to text Cat because you feel like it, or you're gonna go to church because you feel like it, it's just, again, I feel like it goes back to being a child, that child wonder that you have, that desire to be so curious and just to say, I'm going to do this today because I want to. There's no penalty. There's nobody who's going to see you. It's your life. You have to live it. You have to also live with the decisions that you make. So if you want to go and enjoy this one thing, enjoy it. If you think you're enjoying it too much, well, you know the consequences of that, right? I feel like I'm in a similar part, not necessarily reconnecting, um, but more so trying to get back to how I felt spiritually and physically when I was in lockdown, because I had so much time then to really dedicate my faith, my study into all of the things that I like now, right? Like tarot, like spirituality, like the crystals.
Yeah.
And I, unfortunately, with things going back to normal, don't have the time anymore. Now I'm doing a master's degree. So full-time school, full-time work, trying to do a podcast. It's a lot to juggle. But I find that where my journey is now is really what you said about finding those moments of peace. And I'm in a very interesting point in my life, all of us, we're right there with 30. We're at the cusp. We're all getting to that, like most of my friends, we're all getting to that age.
I'm so excited.
Yeah.
I don't want to be a 20-year-old anymore.
Oh, yeah. 30, flirty, and thriving. That's where we're at. Okay.
I'm just nervous about that, like, curse that they said that the moment you turn 30, all your bones start cracking, and
Oh, for sure.
it's like a thing.
Oh, girl, that happened way before.
Yeah. For sure. It's happening.
But this is why
right
we're
now.
running. This is why we're
Oh, yeah.
exercising. This is
Yeah.
why we're taking care of
Being
our,
proactive. Oh yeah.
our wellness and our health. I think their 30s is also when bones start deteriorating. So really start, looking
Take your
into
calcium.
yeah, find the
Calcium and,
movement
like,
that you
collagen.
enjoy. Yeah. So that's where my journey is at right now, right? It's kind of trying to define what it looks like. And I think I'm going to incorporate also, I'm interested in exploring a lot of different actual texts because I've gone so far away from religion and gone straight to the spiritual aspect of it, where it's a more about like beliefs, theories, philosophies. I haven't really delved into scripture, and I've been wanting to, like the Quran, actually reading the Bible to understand one of the biggest things for me right now is really understanding the opposing side is part of my journey as well. And if I feel so strongly about the way that I feel, I acknowledge that I have to understand what the other side is, what the other story is. What is it that they're seeing? What is it that's so important to them? We'll see how far I get into reading the Bible.
It's a big boy.
Yeah. But for sure the Quran, for sure some of the other scriptures that you were mentioning. I think I even have them in my cart way down in my list because what I do to kind of feed into that online window shopping, I just add to cart and then never purchase.
Save for later.
Yes, save for later. But there's a lot of books that I've been wanting to read. One of them being the Don Miguel Ruiz, which Kat actually gifted to me, but I still are in the very beginning of
She's
it.
in it. She's in it.
Yeah. Well, I'm like fifth in, But I really want to get into that child exploration discovery phase in my journey at the moment with spirituality and learning more now about what the religious structures are available and maybe trying to find which one will be the one that fits for me, right? And I think also a part of that is even looking into astrology, but actual text and actual teachings, because I know there's a lot of people who make fun of astrology and a lot of it comes from daily horoscopes and all that. I don't believe in horoscopes, but there is a study that people have done for a really long time with birth charts, with looking at the stars and how that affects energy, how it affects what may be coming. So I'm very surface level in my knowledge when it comes to that kind of spiritual aspect and the esoteric and religion in general. So I think my journey now is getting into the fine details and really educating myself in that and trying to be a more well-rounded person in that sense, right? Because how can I criticize somebody else and somebody else's beliefs or even aspects of them when I don't really know it or understand it? And I want to start with scripture, but I think as in terms of baby steps, I'm also going to start with some of my friends,
Yeah.
asking about their experiences, like Tess with Catholic school or Kat with, even the differences, right, between Catholicism and Christianity.
Mhm.
And I kind of started with one of my friends. I had a very serious conversation with him where he recently started being more Catholic. And I wanted to know why, you know? And I think that's really important for me as a person. I'm very curious. I love to learn about different cultures, diverse people, and what makes them who they are. I think that's so fascinating to me. So, really getting into some of the solid details and understanding the history of it as well. It's going to be a huge project. This is why it's
Yes.
called a journey.
There's
Yeah, you have the
a
rest of your life.
Yeah, exactly.
Pretty much. There's a lot of
Plenty of
history
time.
behind
And I'm a very
astrology.
ambitious person, so if I think that I can in my lifetime learn 9 languages, I'm sure I can also add
Oh,
the
God.
religion of those 9 languages. as well.
Man.
For real, that's a good way to do it.
Yeah.
Pair it up.
Yeah. But yeah, that's pretty much my journey, I think, where it's going to go. What about you, Caitlin?
Something that like comes to my mind, and I just have to get it off of my chest, is I love how you talk about how because you didn't grow up with these religious texts in that way, right? That you had to study them.
Mm-hmm.
Now you want to know the other side. I think that's so beautiful. And I just want to recognize how rare that is. Because, you know, I think that a lot of us might know several people who do the same thing. But I think it's really rare because, as someone who grew up from a religious background, I couldn't tell you more than maybe 5 names from my community of people who are doing the same thing. I feel like when you have a religion, one of the reasons why you cling to it is because it gives you the satisfaction of knowing you don't have to go out and do research now, right? All of your answers are right here. And that's something that has always bothered me about like being in just one community, because you realize how complacent it becomes. And that ties into where I'm at right now with my mystic journey, because that's something that it was a big reason for why I left. So it's something that I'm like, it's a red flag for me. You know, when I see that or a sign of that, I know that it's not where I should be, right? Because I'm trying to always move forward. And like I've already said, I'm a very seasonal person. I love change. So it's natural for me to have those tendencies. So right now, where I'm at is three words that are like constantly running through my mind. So reflection, intention, and discernment. So I think that at this point in my mystic journey, I've absorbed, similarly to what the ladies have said, I've absorbed a lot of lessons, and I've absorbed a lot of texts, and I have a lot of different ideas running through my head at all times when I'm alone, when I'm with other people, and when I'm making new interactions. And I wouldn't say that they challenge each other at all, right? Because they're my toolkit, you know, so they don't contradict. But I have noticed that I've been walking a little bit more in tunnel vision of kind of sticking true to the things that I know. But I think I've stopped questioning why I trust them so much, because I have to recognize that I'm growing and I'm evolving, and I need to check in with myself. So the reflection comes into play, because when I speak a truth to myself that I've known for a while now, I'm starting to question why I believe that's true. And I think that it's healthy, because I think it's the reason it's what I've always done. And I think that for time that I just, like I said, it's a luxury, right? That we get to have these moments where we can spend time in our spirituality, because we could easily just go, right? And not give ourselves the chance to explore that side of ourselves. And so I think that's where the intention comes in, because I have to make myself do that, right? I can easily just let the thoughts go in and let the thoughts leave. But that's not going to make me grow right now. I think that right now I'm having a lot of healthy thoughts in my brain, which is why I want to challenge them a little bit. Because, well, if I have the power to go out and read these texts and inherit them as truth and take what works for me, then I also have the power to make them even truer every day, right? I talked last episode about how I have those affirmations set in my phone. Like, when do they when do they stop relating to me? Right? It's okay that they do because I'm changing and I'm growing out of them. And the discernment is the most powerful part for me because I'm recognizing more and more as I get older the things that I need to work on and that I can be better at, especially in the ways that I am socially and with people. I think that I had a lot of fear when I came out of my Christianity. I felt like I came out of this shell of being very hateful towards people. No one ever knew this, as far as I know, right? Because I never said these words out loud, right? And in church, I wouldn't say that I hated people. I just said that I was praying for them, right? Because we had different words to go around those things. But ultimately, the only people I quote unquote hated were people that I thought were living in sin. And I'm using the word hate because I really think that that's how strongly I felt about the things I thought that they were doing wrong. It was like I needed a justification for my anger and my rage because that anger and rage was really aimed at a lot of pent up trauma that I was not facing. And I can recognize that now as an adult. So when I feel myself still having those feelings towards other people, right? As an adult, I'm like, why do I still get these like waves, right? Of just such strong emotion. And so I've been really working on discerning where that's coming from. Because if I was able to realize, right, so many years later, that all of that was coming from the fact that there were things that happened to me as a kid that I wasn't owning to myself, right? And forgiving myself for hating myself during those times. Like who's to say what's happening to me right now as an adult? And I don't want to have to discover that 5 years down the line. I want to make those changes right now. And if I just need to take that extra moment to be like, why am I frustrated by this person in my life? Right? Like, what about them doesn't work for me? Because it more often than not, and this is like the hardest thing to admit, I'm just seeing something in them that I have in myself. And that's really hard to recognize, because when you pinpoint that, you realize, oh, no wonder like so many other things that people do don't bother me. Right. And I can see that it's like a clear step in the wrong direction for them. Right. Like it's not serving them, but for some reason, it doesn't irk me. It doesn't bother me. And then a specific thing I'll see happen with someone else, and means the world, right? Everything is falling down. I can't even focus. I can't stop thinking about this person, or like I dread like seeing them or something like that. And again, this like happens periodically in life. Like I can't think of a specific face right now. I can only think of the feeling. And that's what I always bring it down to is like, they're more like me than anyone else. They have what I have. And me pouring out this negative emotion is me denying someone who has the same truth as me. And why am I doing that? I haven't healed. Well, let me work on that. And maybe how I'm going to heal is through my relationship with this person and through forcing myself to do the nitty gritty, and to take the harder route because the growth is right there. And what I'm doing is a natural response to fear, right? Having those emotions and finding some way to validate why it's okay. And it's really hard. I mean, it's really freaking hard because I can validate it, right? I can gossip, right? In the way that we were like the negative connotation of gossip, right? Where you're like talking bad about other people, but that's not going to serve me. It's not going to make me feel good. It's not going to make me feel better. And so I'm really trying to just channel that and say, like, all of this energy that I'm putting into this person that they don't even know about, let me just actually pour it into them, and just see what happens, right? It's probably going to be magical. It's been magical before in these ways that I have discerned it. And it's brought forth some really different relationships for myself. And I've grown from them very, very much. And I'm trying to use that, like those experiences in my head to propel me forward with these like new ones as they occur and pop up. But yeah, that's what I'm currently working on. So for any of my friends who are listening, definitely help and keep me accountable with that. I definitely want to be cheering and rooting more people on. And I don't know how much it, like around other people, I don't know how much it feels like I'm spilling, but just know that for me, I feel like it's something that I can work on because it's going to help me grow spiritually. Absolutely.
I have to, by the way, commend you for that work because it takes a lot. First, it takes a lot to take notice of that, right? And acknowledge it, but then to understand that you have to take a step to fix it and realizing what that truly means, what that reaction means. Like, that takes a lot of awareness, of self awareness and questioning that not a lot of people are capable of or really know how to do. So the fact that you're able to do that for yourself is amazing. So I think thank yourself for that.
Thanks, Pam.
Yeah. Because it's a
Thank
lot of
you.
hard work, you know? And what we've talked about today is not an easy topic sometimes. Um, Religion, spirituality, things that we're supposed to follow for the sake of following, whether it be other things, right? Rules that where you're living at has. It's all difficult, but it's not impossible. And I think it's important to just take those tiny steps, right? Even like how you were saying, first you acknowledge it, then you ask yourself why. And as you practice that and do it more and more and more, it slowly starts become easier, right? And second nature. Um, but knowing that it's for you and coming from a place of love, because you could easily have a different reaction, right? You could have that acknowledgement and understand that you have to work through it, but you don't necessarily have to try and be positive about it and help that other person. So the fact that you're having those line of thinking is amazing to have because other people might do the opposite, and that's just acting out of love. So I think that's wonderful. So thank you for sharing.
Thanks. And it definitely does come out of some pain too. I think that part of the reflection is in realizing that there were some relationships that I left behind because I saw those red flags and I wasn't ready to deal with it myself because they were my own red flags.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just seeing them in someone else, who loved me despite what I also had. And so I do it for that too. I do it for the regrets of friendships lost.
Yeah, yeah. So it was a lot. It was a lot today. We went a little high, a little low. Um, as with any journey, as Tess let us know in earlier episodes, like the hero's journey, there's gonna be times where we fall, but it's up to us to decide whether to get back up, right? So just to help end today's episode, I'm gonna be doing the tarot pool, and
The
today,
best part.
yeah, today I'm using Fifth Spirit Tarot, and this tarot deck I actually backed. I don't remember the person who created it. If I can find them, I'll go ahead and link it on our episode in case anybody's interested. And obviously, of course, you can. Oh, look, it's on here on the book. Charlie Claire Burgess. So if you're interested in the deck, you could. I'm sure you can buy it. But I had backed it up on their Kickstarter, and it's a beautiful deck because it leans on that diversity. Right? There's all different kinds of people in here. Trans. There's depictions of LGBTQ, but also I think she has even people with disabilities on here, right? So it's a beautiful deck that shows a diversity of people. So if you're interested in getting it, I highly recommend. And this is one of my first times using it. Um, so here we go.
That's a bunch.
Yeah, we got a lot here. Okay. So we have the Tower, we have the Two of Swords, we have Justice, we have, I think this is the Three of Pentacles, and then the Hierophant. So immediately, what I get from these cards, right? And I don't think I'm going to look at the bottom of the deck today because we have a lot of cards to process already. So in tarot, the Tower is indicative of a moment that shocks you, right? There's a tower, the traditional depiction, there's like lightning, it's breaking, people are falling out of the building. In this deck, there's a person outside of a burning house, there's lightning, there's the storm, there's black clouds from the smoke. Uh, and then it's followed by the Two of Swords. And the Two of Swords is air energy and it talks about indecision. You know, the original Raider Waite depiction is a woman that's blindfolded with two swords. And it's this idea that you don't know what direction to go to and you may be blinded, right? Even in this one, there's a moth at the top, there's the two swords, there's a closed single eye, and then there's water on the bottom. And then after that, we have the Justice card, which in this depiction is this beautiful black woman with a sword in one hand and air, and it's not even real, right? It's just an outline of a sword, and then the Justice, what's it called? The scales of justice on the other hand. And on one side, there's again an outline of a heart, indicative that it's there but not really there, and a feather. And then we're followed by the Three of Pentacles and the Hierophant. So what these cards are trying to, what I think it's trying to reiterate, right, is this idea that even as how we mentioned earlier, there was a pivotal moment that changed our perspective, and it made us have this feeling of indecision, of not knowing what to do and feeling like maybe there's something out there that we haven't seen yet, that we've closed our eye to, right? The Justice card is, to me, it's showing this balance. It's a moment of realigning, and justice is hard. It's hard to discern. It's hard sometimes, like when you look at our justice system, sometimes it doesn't work, sometimes it does. There's a lot, it's a long and lengthy process. And that's what the journey can look like, right? There will be, in every journey, as Tess mentioned, there's a point where you fall. There's a point where things, you feel like you're at your worst. But that's where there's also opportunity, right? To see something different, to see something new. And with the Three of Pentacles following the Justice card, what that says to me is that it's going to take some time. It's going to take some work. In this deck, there's, I think that's a hoe, a hammer, and a chisel that's underneath a bell with a cross on top. And I just want to look up really quickly the Three of Cards, the Three of Pentacles, just to make sure that what I want to say is aligning. Let's see.
And it's so interesting because pentacles traditionally have a lot of imagery with craftsmanship to them, right? Because it's kind of like material items, crafted, cultivated. So there's livelihood that's kind of combined with pentacles, a lot of wealth that's also combined, like ideas of fortitude and foundational wealth. Like how do you establish yourself in the world? So it's just funny that even here we have some tools that represent that, right? Things that you work with, right, to build something. And then, you know, right after, it's also a symbol of religion right there.
Yeah. So, and also just to note, Pentacle is also Earth energy, and it's the slowest moving energy. So it's going to take time. It's going to take work, and it's going to take time, right? And I'm so happy that I looked it up. So in this specific deck, it says building something meaningful, fully aligned, or sacred work sharing skills, working together. To borrow a line from Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come, right? So it's also this sense of the importance of that process of building, that process of doing something with your hands. It takes time, especially in the society now. We're so used to things being instantaneous. You have to be entertained. I remember seeing, I thought it was super crazy. I remember seeing a reel or a TikTok with suggestions on how to keep somebody on your video for 3 seconds so that it would count as a view, you know? And in such a fast moving society, that word building and that visualization of it how much time it takes and how much hard work you have to put in and that effort for that something sacred, right? It's if it's really important to you, you will put in the effort and it'll take time and it'll be hard and there's all these different tools that you might have to use, but it's all going to be worth it. It's all for something that will align with you for you. And after that, we have the Hierophant. And the Hierophant typically in the Raider Way depicts a person with regal robes, very traditional looking, what is that called? It's not a helmet, but like a crown, I guess.
Yeah, some regalia
Yeah,
up
yeah.
there. Mhm.
Something like that with two pillars. And it's very, that depiction to me is very indicative of like traditional religion, structure like that. But this Hierophant uh, shows a woman with her hand is in the air and there's keys floating. Again, the same outline, this idea of the physical and the metaphysical, right? She has a book and she's pointing to it, but she's not looking down, you know? And there's bookshelves behind her. And in this specific deck, the way that they explain it is established systems of knowledge and belief, tradition, orthodoxy, ancestral wisdom, teaching, and learning. Wisdom is knowing that knowledge changes. So again, there's nothing that's fixed. There's always something that can change, and that's okay. She's pointing to the book, but she's got the keys in her hands and they're not really there, but she knows that they're there. And that's what's important. It's what you believe in. And it's going to be a messy journey. You may not know what it is that you have to do. But if anything, I think what's really important here is that Three of Pentacles, because there was something there that it said, sharing skills, working together, right? That sense of community. So if you feel that something might be too difficult, or even if you're at this tower moment where the house is burning down, everything's breaking apart, don't be scared to lean into your community. Don't be scared to lean into other communities or exploring different communities and branching out. And eventually you'll get to this place where you've established your own set of rules, your own belief system, what you know to be true for yourself. And that's all that matters, No one else is going to live your life. They have their own lives to live. If they decide they want to follow that path, so be it. Congrats to them. But you have your life, you have your path. And if anything, I think what this deck is really trying to say is you have that power and do it so unapologetically. Did I say that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Nailed it.
I think it sounded wrong to me. Do it unapologetically. But I can't say it. It's okay.
You got it. We all heard
Because
it.
that's, it's just it. You have the power to do that. And who gives a shit what anybody else says? All that matters is that those keys work for you and they unlock whatever locks that you have. And then we'll reach a moment where we'll feel sure, but there's also something that the card said, right? Knowledge changes and understanding that. So I think, as with what Kat said earlier, being able to flow through those seasons of change, right? And those seasons of change in knowledge and how that might affect you, don't take it so heavy. Understand that it's a part of the nature of finding what aligns with you. Sometimes when you're building things and you don't know much about it, you have to fuck up quite a few times until you realize, oh, maybe I shouldn't be using just dirt to mend these together. Maybe I need to make mud and see how that works. Even the three little pigs, right? I don't know why that came into my head, but then they see, oh, the sticks don't work, the hay don't work. Oh, but the stone works, you know?
Mhm.
So it'll take trial and error, and that's okay. And don't be scared to branch out, because at the end of the day, we have we have three major arcana, and they're in the beginning, the middle, and the end. So for me, that's really powerful because those are long-term energies, and what's staying in those long-term energies is the idea that things are going to be shaken up. If you want to open your eyes and figure out what aligns with you, things will be shaken up. Things are going to fall apart. But then you'll find the balance. You know, the justice card is right there in the middle with the scales. It'll work itself out so that then you get to this point where you don't have to worry about anything else or anyone else. And you'll get to that point where that thing won't bother you anymore, like with all the other things. And you'll realize all the growth that you've had. And you'll be as confident as this woman with the keys in her hands. So with that, my friends, I hope you guys take a deep breath, and a gentle reminder that it's okay. We're only human, and that you are doing the best that you can, the same way that we have been doing the best that we can, and will be continuing to do the best that we can. And unless do you guys have anything else to say?
I just want to say for anyone, everyone, every single person who has listened to this entire episode, thank you so much for listening with an open heart. Like, regardless of what your own spiritual journey and your spiritual background, I would say that listening to this podcast to the end, I hope you recognize that, in my opinion, you've already done so much for your spiritual journey by just listening to our stories. It's the reason why we're sharing them. I always learn so much when I find out about people's spiritual journey, mostly because I think it's something that we all have, but we never talk about. And so, just a thank you to all of you listening. A thank you to both of you ladies for sharing so many vulnerable truths. And this is a really special space. And I know for me, it was a really hard episode to do and to speak up and open up about. So I just want to say I feel better for doing it. And I encourage you all to find your own way to share your truth, because I promise you, you'll heal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do it with us on our many platforms. And you already did half the work by listening to us, so we would love to hear from you.
And just to add, something we're pondering is potentially creating some sort of community, right, with you guys. We're exploring some platforms. So if you've made it this far and you're feeling maybe a little bit alone, keep waiting. We're working hard to try and build up a community for everybody and have a safe space for all of us to share our stories, because I think the way that we have shared ours, there's value in sharing your own story as well. And hopefully we'll have that platform up soon. So stay tuned. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you as always for listening to us, and we'll see you in the next one.
See you guys.
Bye.
Catch you on the
Gotta
flip.
cue that mystical.
Bye.